Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Before we begin, we'd like to first chant the Mangalacharana prayers. Is there anyone who's here for the very first time? Anyone here for the second time? Anyone here for the third time? Okay. It's only my first time. Okay, so hopefully everyone is familiar with the Mangalacharana prayers. If not, they're in the front of the Bhagavad Gitas, which are being passed out now, so we can all chant these prayers together to invoke auspiciousness. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Savaritam Savadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Avaram Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. All together. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so I think what maybe we can do first is read the Sanskrit, and maybe we can do that in the call and response way, and then just read the translation, and we'll read the purport all the way through, so we get an understanding of what's being said, and then we'll go back and we'll just take it part by part, and you'll see, probably you'll see the difference. What I often say is, whenever I start reading in a classroom situation, as soon as I start to read, 3 people start looking out the window. Some people are looking, or doing something. And then it's like when your grandmother used to read to you when you were a little kid, to put you to sleep. It's kind of like that sometimes. So we want to get rid of the passive listening and really get engaged, Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so So we can first with my divine vision. Okay. So we'll read verse 23 of the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And this chapter is entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. So if everyone can please repeat. Shaknoti haiva yashodam.
Shaknoti haiva yashodam.
Rakshalila vimokshana.
Rakshalila vimokshana.
Kama krodo bhavam vegam.
Kama krodo bhavam vegam.
Sayukta sasukhi naraha.
Sayukta sasukhi naraha.
Okay, so I'll just read the translation. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. If one wants to make steady progress on the path of self-realization, he must try to control the forces of the material senses. There are the forces of talk, forces of anger, forces of mind, forces of the stomach, forces of the genitals, and forces of the tongue. One who is able to control the forces of all these different senses and the mind is called Goswami or Swami. Such Goswamis live strictly controlled lives and forego altogether the forces of the senses. Material desires, when unsatiated, generate anger, and thus the mind, eyes and chest become agitated. Therefore, one must practice to control them before one gives up this material body. One who can do this is understood to be self-realized and is thus happy in a state of self-realization. It is the duty of the transcendentalist to try strenuously to control desire and anger.
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
I didn't realize actually it was up on the board. We could have everyone read together, so sorry about that. But okay, so just after reading that, would anyone like to just quickly reflect back something that stood out for them? Anything stood out? Yes, Chaitanya.
I thought it was interesting that Prabhupada says that those who strive strenuously to try and control these desires, they're happy and well situated. Whereas generally the general understanding is that if we strive to fulfill those desires, we'll be happy. Prabhupada's saying the opposite is true, so that's quite a powerful statement.
Very nice. Yeah, did everyone get that? That was the last sentence. No, sorry, it's not the last sentence? Yes, yes. Very nice. Thank you. Anyone else would like to reflect back something? Yes. What is your name, Guru?
Keshvananda Dasi.
Keshvananda Guru. Wow.
Just the first line, basically, if one wants to make steady progress on this path of self-realization, he must try, is what I find quite interesting, is try to control the forces of the material senses.
Very nice. And what stood out for you?
The
try part. And why?
Because it's perhaps beyond our capabilities to actually control it, but we have to make the effort.
But we make the effort. Yes, very nice. Okay. So, I don't know, I noticed a few people, as soon as I said, would you like to reflect back, most everybody either looked at the thing again or looked up there again. Like, oh no, I'm on the spot, I better grab something quick, because maybe so much didn't go in through the first reading. Did anyone feel like that a little bit? Like it just kind of, the transcendental sound vibration washes over me, like, ooh, breathe. But how much do we really absorb and get out of it? So we'd like to go through it, just literally, little bit by little bit, and kind of have this discussion around this. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think, yes, you have your hand raised, yes.
Yeah, I actually wanted to contribute to that before we moved on from that.
Please, what is your name?
Sharadiya Rasa.
Sharadiya Rasa, wow, amazing. Yes, please.
So, Prabhupada is also giving us, are able to control the senses, and they're called Goswamis. And he so nicely gives the description of what they're actually like when they're able to overcome these forces. So not only is he speaking about us in the stage of trying, but he's also speaking about those who are able to do it.
Very nice. Yes, he gives the sadhana and the sadhya, the practice and the perfection. Very nice. Yes, please.
I was just thinking also it's interesting that Prabhupada gives the kind of the physical manifestation that if you don't control these desires, it says that the chest, the eyes, the face becomes agitated. So it's kind of like a checklist, and you can see that yes, actually I'm not controlling my desires because I'm experiencing these things, you know. It's not something like obscure or ethereal, it's very practical.
Very nice. Okay. Very, very wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's start with the first line. So, very first part, before giving up this present body. So, what do you think about that? Before giving up this present body, what kind of stands out to you? Just if you take that little snippet, that this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. Someone at the back. Yes, Ati, what is your name? Goodness gracious, Lakshmi Sringa Prema. Oh my God, the whole spiritual world is here. I feel like a microscopic bug on a mosquito. Just flying around the elephants. Yes, okay.
The first when I read that, I thought this is like an instruction when you are actually dying, but then focusing on the rest of the text, it is actually guidance throughout the whole life. But the first sentence, it is almost like it says that it corresponds to the last sentence. So it could be a thing for people who prepare to die as well, like a guidance to what to do to actually get the happiness.
Okay, very nice, thank you. So for you, it's what you got from that was that it's an instruction for those who are about to give up their body, yes? And before you do, you have to be able to control your senses, kind of thing, yeah? But it's also an instruction through the whole life. Yes.
Yeah. And I just had a reflection.
Please, yes.
Prabhupada's saying, when you said it before, giving up this present body. So it made me think of, this is my present body, but I've had millions of bodies. And if I can't manage to do this, I'm going to be having millions more. So it's like I've got the chance before giving up this body. You know, so I obviously didn't manage it in my other millions of lifetimes.
It's very nice. We're also thinking it could be taken two ways, because on one hand you think this is before giving up this present body, so it's giving you time. Before you give up the body, you can do these things, you can achieve this. But on the other hand, it's almost like saying, because I don't know when I'm going to give up the body, as it were. Sometimes people just think, oh, nicely, easy to old age. But you don't know, so it's also a sense of urgency that before you give up the body, in brackets, and you don't know when that is, you should do this. If that makes sense, almost like Prabhupada or Krishna, as it were, giving that sort of instruction that before you do give up the body, and again in brackets, because you are going to give up the body, that's fact, you should do this. If that makes sense.
Krishna is confirming, reminding us that we're giving up this present body.
Right.
It's a confirmation.
Yeah, that bit is almost like a fact before you might give up, but it's like before you give up, you may want to do this.
Yes, please.
Also, it appears to me that Krishna here is stressing the responsibility that one has in the human form of life to try and do these things, and not think, well, I know that there's reincarnation, so therefore I'll just wait till my next life because I can't get it together now. But he's emphasising here, before you give up this body, that you have to try it now.
Yes, very nice. Isn't it amazing how much is packed just into that little, just that little statement? There's so much there. So the next statement. So before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses. So what do you think is being stated here? What's stated back in? Radha-Krishna, right? Oh, sorry. You two become one. This is Radha-Krishna and you're
Madhuri.
Madhuri. Okay. Please forgive me.
No, it's okay. No, I was just thinking, I guess, from the first part that we looked at and the second, taking it within the context of the entire text itself, apart from it being an instruction to all of us as well, I was thinking about the context of how Krishna is telling Arjuna that, clearly he's told him, get up, fight, and that's what he's trying to convince Arjuna in this conversation. And I was just thinking when he says before giving up this body, he's also telling Arjuna to tolerate the urges that he felt of the material senses, where he just felt like he couldn't get up. He was, he was completely overwhelmed by what he's looking at, what he's seeing, and I guess, so just thinking about it from the context of Krishna and Arjuna, also I guess when we're in those kind of situations, seeing that, we also have those kind of situations where we have these urges, where the senses just go all over the place, and we're faced with situations that need us to tolerate them in some way. So,
very nice. Anyone has that experience where the senses, the urges of the senses drag you a little bit all over the place? Anyone? I'm not the only one, no? Okay. We're all together on this. Okay. Anyone else would like to reflect back on that? Someone other than Chaitanya Bala Prabhu, because he was, and you're Madhuri Prabhu.
I suppose just as a personal reflection of just reading the text, reading this particular part, the thing, and somewhere in Prabhupada as well, it leaves it quite, and I suppose I'm divorcing the text from this little statement here, but if I were to, then in the sense that it's quite personal between the reader and this world and this particular instruction statement, that if one is able to tolerate the urges, it's a very personal, it's quite open-ended, it's very broad. It sort of makes you question what does it mean to tolerate someone in a different context. Tolerance would play a very different role. Tolerance of an urge would be very different to another person. So it seems quite personal in that sense. I feel as if it almost it invites me to be quite personal with this statement, instruction. I don't know what the word is, and I find that quite interesting. What would that mean to tolerate? So we have these various thoughts.
Yes, so that's nice. You're taking it almost like it's a direct instruction, and if that's the case, what are the urges that affect me? And it may be different for others.
Right, and the same in the purport about desire. I mean, I know it's been mentioned, material desire, but if we were to end with the purport that Chaitanya Bala brought up, that sort of he communicated that to try and strenuously control desire, again, it's very open-ended. What is desire? What's the meaning of desire? It's very different for another person in a different situation and context.
Very much.
It's quite inviting in that sense.
Yeah, I remember once interacting with some people, and I guess of all the with the regulative principles, I always thought of all of them, gambling was that was pretty simple. But then I remember interacting with some guys once who were doing some project when they came to the temple, and then we managed to spend some quality time together, and it turned out that both of them were serious gambling addicts, and they had to go through Gamblers Anonymous, and they were sharing how it had brought them to a distraught point in their life, and they were so addicted to just the principle of chance. Oh, come on, just one more time. And they were numbers guys, and they were like, statistically there can only be, but that was their thing. And I remember thinking that that's so not anything I would have a problem with, but I could relate to the principle of the addictive, impulsive nature, because the senses drag us all in the same way, but to different things. So it's very nice. It's really a wonderful point how it's very personal and individual. And we should also be very careful that sometimes we try to apply what is our thing, and we try to stick it on other people, and other people might not have that problem. I remember I said to my godbrother Gauranga Prabhu, I said, I find sometimes, especially when people come from India, they seem to really not have any problem with the Four Regulative Principles. He said, yeah, for them it's pretty easy. He said, but just try to get money out of them. It's like, four regs, no problem. But they didn't come to this country to follow the four regs. It's different for different people, Somebody, you had your hand raised? Yes, please.
Yeah.
What is your name?
Ramaidas.
Ramai Prabhu, okay. Hare Krishna.
So I feel like I said before, giving up this little body, and in the last speech you said you were situated and happy in this world. So these two lines say that, and then if you cannot try to control the urges of your senses, means that then the senses will drag you away from what is the main goal, like at the moment before quitting this body you're going to die. So at that moment you cannot remember Krishna. Then, so evidently you are not well situated in the transcendental platform, because what your aim is to realize, self-realization is to realize that you're not the body, you're the spirit soul. And if you have not realized, so how are you going to realize if the senses are pulling you here and there? So if you try to control and so bring your senses, then before you die, you'll be happy because maybe you know that you're happy because you have been able to control your senses. It means that you'll be able to think about Krishna at the time of death, and at that time you may be transferred to the spiritual world. So that's the aim. I think that's my feeling about this.
Haribol, remember you just given the entire Siddhanta and not two Wonderful. Thank you very much. That's good. What's your name, Guru?
Vinay.
Vinay. Okay.
In the purport, it is said that control the senses. And in the translation, it says tolerate. Control and tolerate are two different. Control, we are the boss of the senses. And the tolerate, actually senses are the boss that we have to tolerate. So they are two different aspects, and they are same, and they have been mentioned in the same place. So could you please elaborate on that thing?
I'd love to, but what I prefer to do is that we systematically go through and we see it. Srila Prabhupada reveals to us and gives us that insight and understanding. And I think that if we do that, then you'll find that he does. And this is an important thing because, I mean, of course it's good to inquire, but sometimes we may find ourselves with the book, right? And we're just reading. Sometimes I know for years my reading was kind of just like, okay, I've got to read for an hour. Okay, done. Take it off and then move on. But it's so nice when you read and you really are consciously reading and you're like, you get to the end of this, and instead of wanting to just turn the page to get on with the next section, you go, Prabhupada, what did you mean by this? And you read back through it again. And you'd be surprised how often Super Soul will make you see something that you missed the first time that correlates the question, or you're like, oh my God, yeah, I get that now. Or you read the bit before. Or how does this connect? Where is it? So this is like, kind of, you're really interrogating, or Srila Prabhupada said we should study the Shastra threadbare. Should really understand. This is a brilliant question. I don't know if you understand the principle of the idea of a car park. Do you know that principle in seminars? Yeah? So when someone has a good question, you park it. So we're going to park your car. There's no charge for the car park, by the way. In Newcastle, it's free.
No problem.
In London, minimum wage to park your car. But we'll just park it, okay? But you don't let us forget that, okay? And if by the end we haven't answered that question, then we'll say something. Is that all right? Okay, yes.
We've read some other verses which are concerning the control of the mind and the senses.
Yes.
And in those verses it's emphasized that those things are controlled by engaging in Krishna consciousness. But it seems that this verse, that's not talked about here. So it appears almost like suppression here. It's control, and it doesn't seem it's mentioned that the senses should be engaged, the mind should be engaged, we should develop spiritual intelligence. So I just wonder what anybody else thinks about that.
Okay. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's just in the part of the Bhagavad Gita where he's talking about the different types of ways of achieving, Krishna consciousness. That's why it's not mentioned, but later.
So you think this is a specific path?
Yeah.
He's talking about here, and it's not linked up to the process of Bhakti Yoga.
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe it isn't. Is that everybody else's understanding? It's not mentioned here. It's not mentioned in the
Perhaps,
translation in the
as
Bible.
Jai Nitai was just saying, if we go through it, perhaps Prabhupada will,
I'm
elaborate.
100% sure that he does answer that. But if we're okay, see, this is also part of the thing that sometimes it can be, when we start to slow down, we want to race ahead. And it's also okay, we can have this kind of interaction where we ask questions, and I'm also okay with that, because I could probably give an answer and point it out in the purport, and then we could move on to the next verse. But I think there's something beneficial to just carrying on. Now I'm also aware we have a time limit, and we've gone over it.
That's okay.
So what's our next time limit?
Well, we want to have some kirtan before we finish, but
Some
just carry
kirtan,
on.
yes.
I would say we can still go on for another 15 minutes.
Okay, so maybe we'll do the questions program, because we won't get through it like that, especially if we share lots of reflections. But hopefully you've seen that there's some benefit to actually going section by section and just inquiring what does that mean. Because actually you could spend an hour and not only get through 3 or 4 sentences, but you become so absorbed that you feel like, wow, I've really got something. Does anyone feel like they got something out of this so far? Like just by reading a little bit?
Aren't you going to finish the text though?
Not in 15 minutes. Not if we keep doing like this. We've only read about 20 words. We did read through the text already. See, this is kind of, it's a different kind of thing. And it's interesting, and I had this the other night with a group that I meet with, and we did it, and one person, he became so agitated that it was really, he said, I don't understand the context of this whole thing. This doesn't make sense to me, and because you're talking about one thing, he's talking about another. Can someone just put, and I was like, it's okay, it's because it's not, because we're used to just like steaming through, or we're used to things being in a certain way. But when you also take time for other people to reflect and share, then these things take time. This takes time. But what happens is sometimes, like tonight, just because my wife and I went through this whole thing on the way down here, and we were really, time flew. I said, the train was like, easily an hour and a half. We were just discussing, well, what did you get from that? And what did you get from that? And I was like, oh wow, okay, that's really cool. We wrote, we wrote it all down, and we're like, this is, because that's Machchitamagata Pranam, that's what we're supposed to be doing. Just enlivening and enlightening one another about the topics of Krishna. That's the goal, in one sense. That's someone mentioned earlier, that's the trying. I mean, and you could say, well, we were just trying to understand. Did we really understand? I don't know. I mean, to understand Krishna ultimately is probably pretty difficult, right? If we try to understand, the nature of Krishna's appearance and his activities in this world, then actually that's perfection. The irony is the perfection is in the trying. Ultimately, Krishna is inconceivable. We can't really. And even if we think, haha, gotcha, Krishna, then he'll go, do you? Really? You got me? Where? He's gone again. So it's like that sometimes. But at the same time, so I think if we try to go through it all together, like we're doing now, we definitely will not get through all the texts in 15 minutes. But there's a principle here that together, when you get with someone, you can really sit and discuss. You don't just have to, how many verses can we get through tonight? All right, we got 10 minutes, how far can we go? But you just like say, what did you get from that sentence? Okay, what did you really, what can you extract out of that? But I'd like to go back to these two questions. There were two really good questions. One is I'll start with Dhananjaya Prabhu, because he mentioned that it seems that Krishna is suggesting a process here that is not bhakti necessarily, but he's talking about controlling the senses, whereas there were previous verses where it may have mentioned that how one can do this. Now, without going back through, I mean, I may be slightly aware of what he's mentioning. And of course, Krishna does also preach to Arjuna throughout the Bhagavad Gita, especially in the next chapter. He gives a whole process of dhyana yoga. And he talks about sitting on a kusha mat or deerskin mat and sitting erect and controlling the senses. And he goes through a whole process that is not necessarily bhakti. But at the end of the 6th chapter, he says, Yoginam api sarvesham. He says, of all the yogis, the topmost yogi is one who
always thinks of me.
Always thinks of me. And what I get from that is that you can still do all these other things, but you always have to be thinking of Krishna. And for us as bhakti yogis, if you're not doing that, then you are missing the point or the goal. I think it was Ramai Prabhu who made that point. Now, in the purport here, Srila Prabhupada, and this whole verse, does this verse remind anyone of another verse from one of our Shastras? Without looking. Okay, one person has an answer. Anyone else? Yes. Okay. What other verse do you think of when you read this?
Nectar of Instruction.
Which verse from Nectar of Instruction? First verse of Nectar of Instruction. Which is? Anyone knows it? Vacho vegam, manasakoda vegam, jiva vegam, mudara pasta vegam, etan vegam, yogi shahiktadira mam apimam pritivim sashishat. And this talks all about vegam. Is the word vegam in this verse? Do you see it in the Sanskrit? And vegam means?
Urge.
Urge. That verse talks about the urges of the
tongue, belly, and
tongue, belly, genitals, the actions of anger, controlling the mind. So all of this is discussed in that verse. And if you look, Prabhupada refers to, he uses, instead of the word urges, he uses a different word in the purport. What is the word he uses? It's a popular word from Star Wars. What is it?
Force.
Force. But we don't want that force with us, right? I'm saying, Prabhupada, in the modern day, you can use a different word, but yeah, may the force be with you. We don't want those forces with us, right? We're trying to get rid of that force. So he uses that as the force of the urge. Now, when I read this, I was also thinking a similar thing to what Dhananjaya Prabhu was saying, but then I realized that we have to understand as bhakti yogis how to apply this. How do we control the mind and senses? So I was thinking vacho. Vacho means the
voice.
Voice. But the principle of speaking. How do we as devotees control speech?
Speak about Krishna.
Chanting, speaking about Krishna, right? Anyone remembers the analogy Srila Prabhupada gives to the person who speaks but not about Krishna?
It's the croaking toad in the field invites the snake of death.
That's right. So the snake of death comes when you just talk. And what's the idea? Not talking about Krishna is called?
Prajalpa.
Prajalpa. It's useless. Useless words, it just attracts death. But if we speak about Krishna, then we control the sense of speech. Some people, some yogis, a different system for controlling speech. If you want to control speech, what would you think? You don't
speak.
Shh, be quiet. But Srila Prabhupada says that for us, silence is
death.
Talking about Krishna.
Oh.
That's silence. For a devotee, talking about Krishna is silence. Because for a Moni Baba, someone who takes a vow of Mona Vrat means silence, I don't speak. So they're not speaking, and if you don't speak, then whatever's in the mind doesn't come out, because there's thinking, feeling, and willing. And once Prabhupada said, a fool is recognized when he opens his mouth. So that I don't open my mouth. So they stay, keep their mouths closed, and you don't cause action. Vak. You know? It means when you speak, you call into action. Brahmins are so potent, when they speak, it manifests. In the modern world, people talk about the principle of integrity. They say if a person has a high level of integrity, whatever he speaks becomes the truth. It's truth and it becomes manifest. This principle is also there in Vedic culture. Because integrity level is so high that when a Brahmin or a person of spiritual potency speaks, it becomes manifest. So then you have to be very careful, because when we also speak, things become manifest, whether we know it or not. So like that. So anyway, we could go through all of these. Manasa, how do we control the mind?
Think about Krishna.
We remember Krishna. We think about Krishna. We focus on Krishna. What is the alternative groups? They talk, how do you control the mind?
Focus on the flame.
Focus on the flame. Yeah. What else? Think of nothing. Right? I remember that's what I used to be into. I used to practice Buddhism. And you used to spend a lot of time emptying the mind. So you were thinking about nothing. And then when I came to Krishna consciousness, I said, yeah, but we should just think about nothing. And someone said, but you're still thinking. And I went, oh, wow. I didn't think about that. And then I heard a lecture and Prabhupada said, that people who want to become desireless. And then he said, but to desire to be desireless is still a desire. So you can't escape. You have to think and you have to desire. But you think about, it's not that you try to create, Prabhupada says, a vacuum. Not that you try to create a vacuum, but you think about Krishna. Vachu Vegam Manasa Kroda Vegam. Anger. How do we control anger? She's very good. I'm not very good. How do we control anger? Laugh? That's pretty good.
The example given is that you try and direct it towards those who blaspheme the devotees or Krishna.
Yes.
Like Hanuman, or set fire to that, or Arjuna.
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada explains that anger is not unnatural. Anger is also a thing. Anger is also, if I'm not mistaken, what is one of the 12 rasas? There's like chivalry, chivalrous ras. So there's different, this is also there. Does Krishna ever get angry?
Yes.
When? Name one time when Krishna got angry. In Shringadeva. Very good, yes.
When he killed King Paundraka, when he said, okay, you want the 4 symbols of Vishnu, take the Sudarshan.
Hare Krishna.
That's confirmed. For a moment I thought Sudarshan was coming. Krishna used Sudarshan. Shishupal. Yes. He was very calm, waiting. 1, 2, keep going, no problem. 3, 4, and then finally. So even Krishna exhibits anger, but the exhibition of anger should be used in the right way. So anyway, in answer to your question, I would say that Prabhupada, he's alluding to and explaining how devotees how they would need to control the senses. But of course Arjuna may be speaking, or Krishna may be speaking here to Arjuna in a different way, but for us as devotees, we have to become knowledgeable enough that even we see that and we understand how is the correct way to do that. Something like that. And what was your question again? Let me see if I can remember.
Control and tolerate.
Control and tolerate.
One takes Via boss and other senses are different.
It says tolerate, but in the Prabhupada is talking about controlling, so there seems to be a difference between tolerating and controlling.
Yeah. They try strenuously to control desire and anger. Yeah, I think what... Did you want to say something? Because I'm just doing what I usually do, is just hold the mic.
I think the key word I would say here is that he must try to control the forces of the material senses. Even though the word may have changed, it still softens it almost by saying you must try. So it's not like black and white, because the word control is quite strong. It's quite a powerful word, control. But it's like softened, because the point is, at least try it. Before you give up your present body, try to control the material senses. And it's quite nice because it's, as we read through, we'll see that Krishna is like that safety blanket, almost, or that net, that he'll be there. We don't know what occurs in the end of our life, as it were, but he'll be there for us. But you must try to control. You must try these serpents, as it were. Sometimes these senses are like serpents. Try to bring them under your control, even though it's explained that they're very strong. The urges are very strong. That's somehow seeing that it's almost like the word was softened, or the instruction was a bit softened, as it were.
I would say also, if you try to do something, like, because if we try to do something, usually we have to exhibit some control, right? So if you fail, what do you do?
Try to learn the thing to pass again.
Yeah, you should try again. What's the saying about riding a bike? You have to get back up on the bike. But in the meanwhile, what do you have to do internally in order? You have to tolerate. They go hand in hand, actually. And I thought that it would be good, and everyone knows what Srila Prabhupada's definition of tolerate is. If you turn to, maybe you can put it up on the board, if someone's running that. It's chapter 13, texts 8 through 12. This is famous list given by Krishna of, he declares all of these things to be knowledge, and everything else he says is ignorance. And the fourth one is tolerance, and the word that is given is shantihi, of course coming from like shanti, or like that. So down in the purport, probably about 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth purport, we got it up there? The fourth paragraph of the purport, it starts, tolerance means. So I suggest that once you get that up there, we can... There it is right there. So let's all read this together, yeah? Tolerance means, everybody, that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor from others. That is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlad, who only 5 years old, was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonistic to his devotion. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlad tolerated him. So there may be so many impediments to making advancement in spiritual knowledge, but we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination. So tolerance means that we should be able to bear insult from others. Should we practice?
I'll give as good
New
as I can.
Vaishnava scoring match, right? Who can insult someone the best?
You mental speculator.
You mental. What are you saying about me? Okay, yes, Chaitanya.
It's just, I had a reflection from when we were on the second part of this thing, but it relates to this. So, when it said, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses, so in other words, to me that makes me think they're going to be there. It's not saying they're going to go away, but if one is able to tolerate them. So I remember when I first joined the temple and I said I can't control my mind to a devotee, and he said it doesn't mean that you're not going to be thinking your things in your mind, but controlling the mind means you don't do anything about it. So therefore that again relates to tolerance, because it just means you have to tolerate. The mind's going to come up with all kinds of crazy things. Back to Vinod Thakur says, my dear mind, you are no Vaishnava. So don't ever expect that your mind's going to, be peaceful and presenting Krishna conscious things. It may not be, but you have to tolerate it. And that means controlling the mind by not acting upon what the mind says. That was a little reflection on that.
So control means to tolerate, and you mentioned a good verse. Apuryamana machala pratishtam. Everyone knows that verse 270. We can stick that up there. Apuryamana machala pratishtam samudrama pravashanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravashanti same sishantim apnotina kama kami. 270. 270, yeah. Got it? Yeah, perfect. So we can read the translation of that together. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So also the word is there. We have to be able to tolerate not being disturbed. So like that, they're going to come. They flow like rivers. The rivers don't stop flowing into the ocean, and then the ocean's like, oh, whew, my goodness. The ocean just doesn't overflow. Everything keeps going on, but we learn somehow to tolerate it. Tolerance also, this word tolerance, I like this word. I'm not good at it, but I like this word because different people have different ideas of what tolerating means. I'll show you one person I was speaking to a number of years ago. She was talking about a devotee and she was a little upset, and she looked at me and she said, I've been tolerating him for 15 years. And I said, wow, is that what tolerance looks like? And I thought, you must be really advanced tolerating for 15 years. And then I thought what someone else said, like suppression. I think someone mentioned this word earlier. It sounds like you've been suppressing something for 15 years, and now, like a volcano, you're ready to explode. And from that, I began to kind of look and try to understand, what does it really mean to tolerate? And the kind of revelation that I came to is that tolerance is a little like eating. Right? Just like Prabhupada said, one has to be able to, bear insult from others. And he said, and you should expect it. Don't think that it won't happen, because the world is constituted in that way. And if you take to the spiritual path, you'll have to face many insults from other people. Prabhupada said, just get ready for it. He doesn't say, chant Hare Krishna, and, of course we say, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. My godbrothers say, chant, be happy. It's the and. There's a lot of stuff in the and, Chant and be happy. So what happens between the chanting and the and bit? But, people will insult us, but what do we have to do? So tolerance means to be able to digest, right? So suppression is like indigestion. Yeah? Has anyone ever had indigestion? It's like, and if things get hung up, anyone here Ayurvedic doctor, anything? Okay. These days there's almost always one in the crowd. So many diseases are caused from bad digestion. And as we get older, the fire of digestion becomes weaker, and usually you just can't eat like you used to, especially Hare-Krishna devotees who used to be prasadam. Paneer, 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 yes, paneer, paneer, gulabs, sunrise, lassi, Sankirtan, Nikita. No problem, and you're good to go. Now it's like, no rice, little dal in a cup, please. Can I have 2 pieces of paneer? No lassi, you got a cup of tea, something digestive. It's like that. So, but tolerance is like digestion. So it means you're going to have to something's going to go in, right? You're going to have to absorb something that's happened to you. Yes? So something has happened. Okay, this situation is talking about the urges. The urges of the senses are there. But if we look at this principle that someone says something to you, anyone has ever been on the receiving end of something not so nice that someone has said to you? Right? And let's hope your first reaction wasn't this. Or from the famous movie. You talking about me? Yeah. So it's got to go in. Now, it can go in, and we can push the pause button. We don't have to react. That's the other thing. You can actually hit pause and let it go in, and let it go down, and then just like anything else that we try to digest, you get some nutrient out of it. Some nutrient is there. And if we remember that basically because of our karma, nothing's coming to us that we don't probably deserve anyway. And maybe this person doesn't know the truth, but somehow he's become the instrument of my karma, or she. And they're saying something, and if I think about it, probably I deserve worse than what I just got then. So did something they say make sense to me, regardless of where it came from? Is there something I can get from that? Oh, you're so silly, why did you do it like this? And you just think, I'm not silly. Immediately we want to defend. The false ego wants to protect itself and defend. But if we stop that defending propensity, and we just take that, yes, why am I so silly that I did something that has discouraged or upset this person in such a way that they feel they have to speak to me like this? Maybe there is something for me to get out of this. They're still a jerk for speaking to me like that. But maybe if I slow down and think a little bit about this, or maybe if I do like that, I got it. Okay, so that was something beneficial. I got some nourishment from that. And then what happens when you feel nourished? When someone gives you something that's nourishing, you feel gratitude, satisfied. And you're like, thank you. And then whatever the other stuff is like, all the other stuff, usually when you eat, there's also the other end that has to deal with its business, right? So there's always a little waste. So there might be a lot of waste and a little nourishment, or there might be a lot of nourishment and a little bit of waste. But it has to go all the way through. If it goes in and gets stuck here, that means problems. Problems in relationships, problems in health, problems in chanting, problems in everything. Because it's hung up. I haven't tolerated anything. Tolerance means that it goes in, I deal with it, I address it philosophically, analyze it, look at it, discard what's not needed, and accept something that's good. Tolerating the urges. Why am I so attracted to this aspect of my senses? What is it about this that keeps attracting me? I fell for it again. It's not that I grit my teeth, because that's just the other side of the same coin, right? Attachment and aversion. And Prabhupada said sometimes you may need to use a thorn to remove a thorn. So sometimes we may need to use something that we're attracted to or attached to help us to become free from it. So my Guru Maharaj once said to me that Krishna consciousness in its essence sometimes is very simple, but the application is so personal and sometimes so difficult. To know how much to apply at what time to what individual is not always so easy. And that's the art we must learn. How to apply Krishna consciousness in our life in such a way that we make, what Prabhupada says here, steady progress. He says repeatedly, Krishna consciousness, it's a gradual process, but it is a certain one. If our mentality is, all right, I gotta get to there, I gotta be the Maha Bhagavat next weekend. Good luck. Good luck. Because it's a long process. The acharyas say, the closer you get to Krishna, the more you realize just how far away you really are. And that's good. That's success, because that's real. That's reality. Illusion is that I'm thinking, it's me and Krishna and it's all good. That's just nonsense. It's not true. Maybe it is on the ultimate platform, but have you really realized it? Or is that just false ego speaking? But the more we realize how far away we are from Krishna, the more we are really confronting and dealing with the truth. And Krishna is happy about that, because that's humility. And then we can learn to tolerate. You know, like my Guru Maharaj said, that brahmachari ashram is like getting on one of these fast motorcycles going back to Godhead. He's like, it's the fast path, because there's nothing else you have to do or be worried about except cultivation of Krishna consciousness. He said the Grihastha ashram is like having a beat-up old banger. It keeps breaking down all the time. And you're on the road, God, broke down again. We broke down. And there goes another brahmachari. But he said, but the danger is that if the brahmachari has an accident going so fast, it's a serious problem. But the grihastha is like, we broke down again. But either way, you make it back to Godhead. So basically the point is that it is a gradual process. So we have to go through it like that. And we have to tolerate so many things. So we have to tolerate so many things, our own shortcomings. That's the place to really start. That we have to tolerate, I'm weak. I'm not as strong. But if I take shelter of Shri Panchatattva, if I take shelter of Srila Prabhupada, then I can be very strong. I'm going to ask my wife to conclude with some real words of wisdom.
No, it's late.
So I always do this. I get the mic, I can't help it. I just talk. So anyway, I don't know if any answers to any questions were there. I don't even know if this class was useful to anybody in any way, shape, or form. But my strong encouragement, and I think my wife will agree, we both are finding, lots of nectar and hearing and chanting together in such a way that we really interrogate Srila Prabhupada's books. And we'd like to encourage everyone to really take this on and read Srila Prabhupada's books that he so painstakingly translated for all of us, and really get into Srila Prabhupada's books, and you just climb into the spiritual world and be like, oh yeah, I get it now. Okay. Sorry for you.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's really helpful, and I've also inspired by, everyone trying to reflect, and I think it helps, as someone said, we should try and first become conscious, and then we can become Krishna conscious, and I think this type of systematic, studying, threadbare, it really helps us to become more conscious of what we're reading. So otherwise it just goes in one ear and out the other. And, you know, if we can just sit in the class and again and again and again, but we're not really connecting with anything. So I think myself, I took it from this that it's, you know, there's so much there in Prabhupada's books. And, you know, I'm missing it because I'm not really trying to study it. So I think personally it's been really helpful. So thank you very much, both of you, for enlightening us in that regard.
Very nice. Thank you for your encouragement. Actually, you just reminded me of one thing, the Srila Prabhupada, the term Ishtagosti. Anyone has heard of this term, Ishtagosti? In modern day ISKCON, Ishtagosti means we're going to get together and the leader's going to tell you what you did wrong. It's kind of what it means. But anywhere Prabhupada speaks about Ishtagosti, it means everyone should come together and discuss the topics of Krishna consciousness. The Ishtagosti. So, Goshti means usually to preach, right? Goshti Ananda, you know, like that. So the principles that we preach. So like that, we should come together like this and discuss and hear from one another. Because as soon as the speaker turns it back on you, you have to engage. You feel like, oh no, now I'm on the spot. I better read this a little bit better now. I better pay more attention. I might have to say something. So once it's on you, then you have to pay attention. So anyway, Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much. It's very enlightening, very inspiring. And I hope that tomorrow we'll see you all again for the morning program and also some Sankirtan. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai. His Grace Jai Nitai Prabhu ki Jai. Her Grace Bhava Bhakti Mataji ki Jai.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.